Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk about a basic survival skill to preserve food for longer, which is going to be water bath canning. Here you'll see the book we'll be using. This has a lot of recipes. I decided to start with applesauce since it's an easy and beginner friendly one. Now, water bath canning is a method of preservation using these kinds of canning jars. You'll also need a jar lifter. That's our wide mouth funnel. That is to keep the cans from touching the bottom because they will break. And then you need a pot and carving board and a lot of apples, as you can see here. Now you want to always wash and rinse your produce. And then after that, you're going to want to divide your apples into quarters, removing any of the core. Some people core them first. I find it easier to do it this way, but whichever way is fine. Now, it's important to note that fruits are ideal for water bath canning. Other low acid foods, such as like potatoes, green beans, meats, you need a pressure canner to process those. But fruits and high acid foods can easily be preserved with this method. After you have them all chopped, you're going to want to put them in a big pot and put them on to soften the apples. Once they are soft enough to pass a fork through easily, you will want to drain any water that remains, and you can process them either using a food processor, blender, or if you're like me, you can choose to do it the old-fashioned way. It's basically like mashing mashed potatoes. You're just going to go in there and take out any aggression you have towards the administration as you mash that down into the consistency of applesauce. Now, this will be a little bit chunkier than most of your store-bought applesauce. While I'm doing this, I like to start warming my cans. Now, the reason we warm the cans is to avoid them breaking from thermal shock. If you ever seen glass expand or contract, you know that going from one temperature to the other extreme can break glass. You add 2 cups of sugar for this particular recipe, which I'm doing here, and you're also going to want to add a little bit of lemon juice. That raises the acidity and helps keep it preserved, and also just adds a little bit of flavor to it. I used a tablespoon and a quarter because I had spilled a little bit, but it is a tablespoon and a half for this recipe. Now, while it's cooking, you're going to want to stir it frequently so that the sugar doesn't burn or stick to the bottom. That just kind of is for taste. If it does burn a little bit, it's not the end of the world. As you can see here, I still got my jars heating as I'm doing all of this. You want to make sure they're in there for a good 10-15 minutes. If it doesn't simmer, you can add a top like I did here to try to get that up to heat. The applesauce itself, you do want to make sure boils. The temperature for preserving and canning is 212 degrees, which is the temperature of boiling water, and that will help keep it clean. Once your jars are all warmed, your applesauce mixture is done, you're going to use your jar lifter to get them out of the pot, and then you're going to fill the jars. Now, when you're filling a jar, there's some things you want to look out for. There is a certain level that you want to fill them to, depending on the recipe. And that book I showed you, it will tell you for applesauce, it's going to be in between these 2 lines, which gives it a 1/2 inch of what's called headspace, or the amount of oxygen in the jar. And that's what's going to help it seal. Now, when you do this, you're going to want to press on the sides to get out any air bubbles, because those air bubbles can disrupt the vacuum and keep it from properly sealing, and that lack of oxygen getting to your food is what preserves it, so you don't want any air bubbles. Make sure when you put the lid on that it is in contact with that gummy surface. That's going to seal it, and then you lightly, at fingertip tight is what they call it, just lightly screw on that lid, but don't tighten it down, because you want the extra air to actually escape from there. You don't want to be on so tight it doesn't have a chance to do that. Then once you've done this, you're going to repeat it for all 6 of your jars, or at least 6 that this recipe is supposed to make. If you look at this next part, I actually ended up with 5, and then this one is a good example of what you don't want to do. See where the headspace is supposed to be? Well, we have way more than that, which means that if we try to seal this, it's not going to seal correctly, and you can get botulism from that, so don't use it. Once you have a roiling boil for your canning, then you're going to put on a timer for 20 minutes. Now, this does vary due to elevation. Make sure to look up, if you live in a high altitude area, the cooking difference. Once they've processed for 20 minutes, you're going to take your jar lifter and you're going to start taking them out. Now, they are going to be very hot, so you want a surface like a cutting board to cool them on. You can kind of see the divots here on the top, and that indicates that there's still some flex. See, when I push down on it, it's not sealed yet because it's still hot. When you leave them to cool, you want to see that this is concave and it doesn't flex like the lid in the last take. That's going to let you know that that seals on tight. After cooling for 12 hours, you can also pick them up and see if the lid's on there good. You should be able to lift it with that little lid, even without the band on. So if you want more resources, more recipes, more information on canning, this is a great site. It gives you everything you need to know, and it's absolutely free. Stay safe.